The town of Belhaven is the kind of place people think they know the edges of. Salt on the air, a single main street, a row of small shops that seem to have been there since the photographs in the library were taken. It is a town where the florist knows the name of every baby born that year, and the diner keeps a ledger of who likes their coffee black and who. It is the kind of town that believes, perhaps a little foolishly, that terrible things happen far away. On a gray Thursday in late October, that belief unraveled. Her name was Evelyn Hart. She owned a little bookstore called Willow and Ink, a narrow place with shelves that leaned like confidants and a bell on the door that chimed like a small announcement. Evelyn was 32, a careful person by most accounts, with quiet rituals, opening the shop at 9, sweeping the front step, making a pot of tea that always smelled faintly of lemon. She lived above the shop in a small apartment that overlooked the alley. The town liked her. She had a gentle way of remembering people's favorite authors, of sending a package off for a neighbor whose mother had died. That Thursday, when Agnes Cole next door went to raise her blinds, she found the front door of Willow and Ink closed, the light off. That was unusual. Evelyn kept the shop open later on Thursdays to accommodate students and parents, Agnes called out, then climbed the narrow back stairs and found the rear door unlocked. The back room smelled faintly of tea and something metallic. On the floor, behind a toppled rolling ladder, lay Evelyn. The description the officers delivered later was clinical. A single blunt force trauma to the head, found lying face down beside a neat pile of unshelved books. The county coroner would later record the cause as blunt head injury. There was no sign of forced entry. A small, rare book that Evelyn had been looking after for a collector was missing. Belhaven's collectors whispered about when they wanted to impress one another. When Detective Mara Klein stood in the doorway that afternoon, she smelled lemon and old paper and a town's sudden, fragile fear. Klein had been on the force for 14 years. She had seen grief before, but grief in a town this small felt different, immediate, communal, like a wound that drew every eye. She moved slowly through the shop, making notes, speaking in compass points and measured questions. The initial list of suspects was small. Thomas Reed, who ran the antique store across the street, had a grudge. His business had been struggling. Evelyn's book draw had brought a few collectors to the main street that might otherwise have browsed in his shop. He had been seen arguing with Evelyn earlier that week over what he called underhanded business practices. A delivery driver reported seeing a man in a dark jacket loitering near the alley that morning. Jonah Mills, a young journalist who wrote
seen more than once in the shop on the pretext of research. He'd been infatuated with Evelyn's attention, according to a friend. If true crime teaches anything, it is that motive and opportunity do not equal guilt. Detective Klein began in the arithmetic of evidence where life is less melodramatic and more patient. Fingerprints, CCTV, shoe prints, cell phone pings, receipts. The coroner's report told the investigators about force and timing. The security camera at the pharmacy caught a grainy silhouette crossing the alley at 8:40 a.m. A neighbor's smart doorbell recorded a shadow in the doorway. Forensics lifted a partial footprint from a soft patch of mortar by the back stoop, and technicians found a few loose fibers, a dark thread caught in the corner of a carpeted crate. The townspeople did what towns do. They filled the intervals with stories. Some said Thomas's debts were deeper than he let on. Others pointed to Jonah's late nights and restless energy. He had been seen scribbling notes in a journal and muttering about a piece that would put Belhaven on the map. Detective Klein listened more than she spoke. She knew how temptation shapes a narrative, how rumor makes a suspect more interesting than the truth. Evidence is both stubborn and small. The missing book gave them a starting point. Whoever took it had motive to stage a theft or to take something they thought would be valuable. A receipt found wedged beneath the register, torn across the corner, showed the initials TR in a hurried scrawl. It was the kind of detail that looks damning in the abstract. Thomas Reed had the exact initials. He admitted to having argued with Evelyn, admitted his shop was in trouble, admitted to being on the main street that morning. He had no alibi for a 40-minute window. The town leaned into certainty. But Detective Klein's work operates like slow water wearing down stone, patient, repetitive, until a little channel becomes a rule. She ran the TR through every possible iteration, typed receipts, scrawled notes, business cards, and finally settled on the courier slip that matched the handwriting more closely than anyone had expected. She ordered a handwriting analysis. She watched CCTV footage for subtle cues. She had the forensics lab compare the partial footprint to shoes reported missing from a recent burglary uptown. The tread pattern was uncommon. It was a matter of inches and probability. The breakthrough came, as breakthroughs often do, in the distracted moment when someone checked a detail for the sake of completeness. Jonah Mills, the journalist, had taken photographs in the shop several times. When police asked to see his camera, he hesitated and then handed it over. The memory card was a paperwork headache of town festivals and sandwiches and one folder labeled Hart, 10.18. Inside that folder was a photograph that, at first glance, looked like any other, Evelyn smiling over a book. Enlarged. However, the photograph captured more a reflection in the shop's old brass lamp of someone moving in silhouette behind a stack of crates. The silhouette's outline suggested a camera bag and a gait different from regular customers. Jonah said he had taken the picture. He said he had left and heard nothing more. Interrogations are not scenes in a movie. They are quiet exams. Jonah was clever in a way that read as both charm and brittle agitation. He told Detective Klein he had been working on a feature about small-town histories. He admitted to wanting Evelyn's attention. He admitted to borrowing a camera to take a few shots. He denied being in the back room that morning. For a time, the case perched on the edge of two plausible stories: Thomas's financial desperation and Jonah's unsettled obsession. Forensics, again, returned to speak. The fibers caught in the carpet matched a rare wool blend typical of imported camera straps, the strap pattern Jonah used in his kit. The partial footprint, magnified, matched the left shoe from a pair Jonah had recently purchased and that his roommate reluctantly provided for comparison. DNA recovered beneath Evelyn's fingernails showed a partial but matchable profile to a known sample in a police database, not of Jonah's, surprisingly, but of someone with no prior record, an individual who had donated blood to a mobile clinic years earlier. That DNA match would later complicate the tidy story the town wanted. Detective Klein's notebooks filled up. Receipts, interview notes, a map of the alley with circled points where evidence had been found. She interviewed Agnes again and asked about the sound of the day, any unusual vehicles, any raised voices. Agnes remembered a delivery truck and then the clink of a camera strap against a countertop as a man moved around the aisle. He was young, she said. He kept touching the same book, like he wasn't sure if it belonged to him. Her eyes filled when she spoke of Evelyn's laugh. The arrest of Jonah Mills felt inevitable to many. He had motive, he had fibers, his shoes tread matched. He had been infatuated and publicly persistent. When they brought him in, the town wanted answers and, for a while, they were satisfied by the neatness of the tale, a lover's obsession gone wrong. Jonah, in a moment of rawness, admitted to being in the shop earlier than he said and to leaving behind the camera. He did not confess to hitting Evelyn. He insisted he left before anything bad happened. The prosecution built a case that leaned hard on the physical evidence and the emotional context. The defense pushed back with reasonable doubt. The DNA did not belong to Jonah. The camera photo was ambiguous. The TR receipt could have been someone else entirely. Jury selection in a small town is its own experiment. People who read the local paper felt they had already traveled the trial's 8 miles. The courthouse filled on the first day with familiar faces, everyone seeky.
Finality, as if a single verdict could stitch the town back together. The trial ran like a slow reveal. Witnesses testified about arguments and suspicious figures. Forensics walked jurors through fibers and footprints and the way partial DNA matches must be interpreted. The defense introduced alternative theories, suggested that the rare book might have been the key, that collectors can be thieves, and that theft can escalate. At the center of the room, Jonah sat with his hands folded, sometimes shaking. Everyone saw the human cost in his near-invisible tremor. 2 weeks in, a new detail emerged. Small, almost callous, almost accidental. A clerk went through Jonah's email metadata searching for notes and found a string of messages to an anonymous account. They were not threats. They were proposals. Sell the story, spin the narrative, make it bigger. There was talk of manipulating a lead. There were typed instructions about planting images and orchestrating a scoop. Jonah's explanation was messy. He had been trying to get a career-saving piece. He had panicked. He had tried to create drama. The jurors listened as a man explained how he had tried to manufacture a narrative. Yet even with the emails, the DNA and the fibers, Detective Klein was not satisfied. Small inconsistencies nagged. The timing of foot traffic on Main Street, the courier slips out formatting, the business ledger that showed Thomas had not been as penniless as he claimed. Klein went back into the stacks of her own notes and found a slip of a conversation recorded in her long hand. What if someone clever framed both a narrative and a man? It was a hypothesis, not evidence. It turned out there was a pattern to the manufacture. The first edition book, the one missing, was later found in a dispatch package addressed to an old bookstore in another county, a place Jonah had once freelanced for. The label had been retranscribed in a different hand. The handwriting on the courier slip matched several scrawled notes found tucked into Jonah's notebook, but those notes were not Jonah's handwriting. They were composed in his presence, typed, then traced, then placed as if a stage manager were arranging props. A series of CCTV frames, analyzed more closely, revealed something chilling. A second set of shoes in the alley 5 minutes after Jonah left. They were larger, heavier, the tread pattern not Jonah's. Detective Klein followed that second trail until it led to a name she had not considered. A local handyman who worked odd jobs up and down Main Street. A man with a long record of petty theft but never violence. His footprints matched a heavy tread. He admitted, under questioning, to moving crates the week before on behalf of an unnamed man and to delivering a package to a runner who paid well. Under compulsion, and a quiet unraveling in the interview room, he told Klein what he had been paid to do, move a stack of boxes to the back room that morning and wait until things died down before taking them away. The pieces, once scattered, began to fit with a different picture. Jonah, hungry for a story and desperate for traction, had talked about staging a theft to create heat, a plan he claimed in later interviews he never thought would turn into anything violent. He had recruited someone to move boxes and to create activity, but the thing about plans is that they take on lives of their own. The person Jonah had recruited had other debts, other compulsions. The courier slip with TR had been written by a nervous hand meant to point suspicion toward Thomas Reed, a convenient local antagonist. Someone had capitalized on Jonah's manufactured drama and turned it into a violent opportunity. In the end, the case did not offer us a single villain in black and white. The man who directly struck Evelyn, the handyman said sobbing into his palms, had panicked when Evelyn surprised him removing the rare book. He had not expected her to come into the back room. The blow, he said, was meant to be a scare, a shove, and something in the stack of books hit them both. And then there was a thud, and it was too late. He had fled. He confessed. The DNA match, it turned out, was his. The donation years before had provided the trace that had worried the lab. Jonah's role was a different one. He had not swung the blow. He had manufactured the stage, amplified suspicion, and then watched a story become a tragedy. In court, that mixture of intent and consequence did not fit neatly into the categories jurors have available. Jonah faced charges of conspiracy to commit theft and for falsifying evidence. He was convicted on lesser counts. The handyman pleaded guilty to manslaughter and received a sentence that rippled through Bellhaven like the waves on the cove. Detective Klein stood, months later, in the same doorway where she had first smelled lemon and paper. The shop was open again, under new stewardship, with small stacks of books that seemed to stand a little straighter. People returned to coffee orders and ledger entries, but Bellhaven had been changed, not just by the loss of Evelyn, but by the knowledge that a small act of narrative manipulation, a decision to create drama, can set in motion a chain of events no one can truly foresee. In the aftermath there were memorials, a bench outside Willow and Ink with a brass plaque, a community reading night where strangers read for each other to feel less alone. There was also quiet, practical work, better training for how journalists treat subjects, new protocols for how donors' DNA can be cataloged and matched, conversations in the town council about how rumor moves faster than fact. The hardest truth is that truth itself can be fragile. We prefer tidy stories because they comfort us. The suspect, the motive, the neat verdict. Real life is messier. It is a tangle of small decisions. A camera left in a bag, a pair of shoes purchased for one purpose and worn for another, a
Courier slip scribbled with initials meant to misdirect. Those small decisions collide and sometimes end in the worst of ways. Evelyn Hart did not live to see the changes. She did not see the way her little shop became a rallying point for a town that suddenly had to consider how much it wanted to be seen and how carefully. But in the boxes of donated books and in the memory of those who loved her, she remained, a quiet, kind presence who loved paper and lemon tea and the hum of people talking over new paragraphs. If there is anything to take away from Belhaven, it is this: the stories we tell have power. They can heal, they can deliver justice, and when mishandled, they can harm. We owe it to the victims and to ourselves to handle truth with care, to let evidence lead, to let patience stand watch, and to remember always that behind every case file is a person with a name and a town that will not quite be the same. This story is fictional, a dramatization inspired by the true crime genre and real forensic practice. Courier slip scribbled with initials meant to misdirect. Those small decisions collide and sometimes end in the worst of ways. Evelyn Hart did not live to see the changes. She did not see the way her little shop became a rallying point for a town that suddenly had to consider how much it wanted to be seen and how carefully. But in the boxes of donated books and in the memory of those who loved her, she remained, a quiet, kind presence who loved paper and lemon tea and the hum of people talking over new paragraphs. If there is anything to take away from Belhaven, it is this: the stories we tell have power. They can heal, they can deliver justice, and when mishandled, they can harm. We owe it to the victims and to ourselves to handle truth with care, to let evidence lead, to let patience stand watch, and to remember always that behind every case file is a person with a name and a town that will not quite be the same. This story is fictional, a dramatization inspired by the true crime genre and real forensic practice.